I think raised beds are a great choice for most gardeners. I love them. So stick around and find out 10 reasons why. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I discuss everything gardening. Today, the topic is the benefits of raised beds. Most of my garden is and will be raised beds because I think it's almost an ideal way to garden. To begin, let's discuss exactly what a raised bed is. A raised bed could be defined as any bed that's raised above the soil level. This is an area where I planted some raspberries, and it is a raised bed. It is higher than the surrounding ground. This is also a raised bed. It's about 6 inches above ground level. It's an area between two larger raised beds, and I'm growing some fruit bushes in here. While most of these benefits are benefits for these lower raised beds that might only be 6 inches above ground level, for this video and ones to follow, I'm really going to be focusing on taller raised beds. The raised beds that extend from about 12 inches up to 24 or even 30 inches tall. And the reason I make that differentiation is most evident in this first benefit, and that's high raised beds make gardening more accessible to more gardeners. Now, part of that accessibility is just being able to reach in from all sides and take care of the plants. But I think more importantly, the higher beds mean that almost all gardeners have the ability to garden. At the Galileo Garden, we had a number of students that were in wheelchairs. They could still come out to the garden and do all of the gardening activities because these higher beds gave them access at a height that was appropriate for them. For old guys like me, I've got a bad back and I don't like leaning over any more than I have to. Well, a higher raised bed means that I can kneel and have full access to the bed without having to lean over. When you choose the raised beds for your garden, you have complete control over their size and their height. This bed is a little bit shorter than the one I was just at. I chose this size because I think it's more appropriate for my grandkids. They can garden easier in a bed at this height than one that might be a little taller. If you saw my video about my soil test and the results that I got, you might remember that I don't have great soil. It's very low in nutrients. The second benefit is touted by many as the primary reason to do raised bed gardening. And that's because you can fill your beds with your choice of soil. So if you're starting with a very poor soil, you can actually buy a very rich soil and put it in place. Or as I also showed in my earlier video about how to fill raised beds, you can create your own good soil by just choosing what type of amendments you're going to use to fill the bed. Raised beds allow you to choose your soil, which is why I'm doing so many raised beds. I'm saving myself years of effort. I don't have to do the amending and the improving of my native poor soil in these beds. I can just start off right away with great soil. I also have the ability to choose the type of soil that I'll put into these raised beds. Naturally, what I have in this area is alkaline soil, and most soil sources offer a neutral or alkaline soil. But if I wanted to grow something like blueberries that require an acidic soil, well, then I can get a mix or make a mix to fill a bed and make it highly acidic so that I could grow blueberries. A third benefit is that raised beds help deter pests. And by pests, I don't necessarily mean insects. I mean anything that would cause damage to your beds. I love to garden with my good friend Lily, but she can cause damage if she wanders across an area that was newly planted. Just a small raised bed is enough to deter her. She's not going to be jumping in these beds. She's going to walk around them. It's easy to train, and it's easy to prevent damage. I have a problem with gophers and voles in this garden as well. Underneath all of these high raised beds, I put hardware cloth so that those animals can't tunnel into these beds from below. That's not as easy to do in a lower raised bed, because if you put something like a fabric cloth underneath, well, then you're also limiting the potential root growth to just that top 6 inches. I also have a rabbit problem. These higher beds are going to deter the rabbits. If they really wanted to, they could jump into an 18-inch high bed. But I'm after deterrence. There are so many other areas that they're more likely to roam, and I'm not worried about them getting into these beds because they're high enough. Another great benefit is that you can put a raised bed just about anywhere. If you only have one spot in your yard that gives you the sun you need, well, that might be the spot for a raised bed. And something like these stock tanks might be perfect. Now, it does have a bottom, even though I've drilled a lot of holes in it. So it could be argued that this is more like container gardening as opposed to raised bed gardening. But I'm treating it like a raised bed, just like the ones behind me, because the bottom helps keep out the gophers. And this allows me to place it anywhere I want. A raised bed, be it metal or wood or cinder block, whatever the material, can be placed on top of concrete or gravel or contaminated soil or any other place that you might not be able to grow in the ground. You have the option for a raised bed. As long as the depth of the bed allows enough room for the roots to grow through the soil, you don't need to be so concerned about what's on the bottom, about what the bed is placed on top of. Another great benefit is that these beds will extend your growing season. They tend to thaw sooner in the spring and stay warm longer in the fall. That can be very important for gardeners like me that live in cold regions. And when we get a light snowfall, it's very evident that the snow melts first in these raised beds. Even in beds that are only 6 inches above the ground level, they will thaw faster. That means that I might get 1, 2, 3 weeks on each end of my growing season where the soil is warm enough for me to grow in a raised bed, and I might not be able to grow yet in the ground. We're halfway through these 10 reasons for growing in a raised bed. Have any of them enticed you yet, or have any of them been the reason why you're currently growing in raised beds? Let me know below. The number 6 benefit to a raised bed is that weeding is easier. Because of the access, I can actually sit on a bed and comfortably pull any weeds that I find. I don't have to bend over. I don't have to put a lot of effort into it. Weeding is easy on a raised bed. Also, because it's higher, it's less likely that many weed seeds will even be introduced into raised beds. A lot of the winds and the walking in a garden will bring seeds from one area to another area. Well, you don't have that when raised beds have this very defined space. And in this space, we're also typically putting mulch, which I highly recommend. That mulch helps keep down the weeds as well. And if you also mulch your pathways, well, you might be able to bring your chores of weeding down to almost nothing by using raised beds. Another benefit of raised beds is that they're good for drainage, soil drainage. Especially if you live in a really wet region with a lot of spring rain or maybe a lot of snow that melts pretty quickly, you probably have a muddy mess in your garden at that time of year. But you won't have that problem with a raised bed, especially if you fill it with a good draining soil, because you'll have the same rain and the same snow, but it's going to drain out the bottom of the bed. It might add to some sogginess in your pathways, but the soil in your bed won't be as waterlogged as the soil in the rest of your garden. And you've got complete control over that by how you choose to fill your bed. Raised beds are also a good way to avoid plant damage. And even these lower raised beds can provide that benefit. And what I mean by that is the simple activities that take place in a garden can be damaging for plants, like dragging a hose to water. I'm sure you've had that problem if you've gardened for any time at all. You're dragging your hose, you're watering, you're focused on the plants you're watering, and you don't even realize that you might have knocked over a whole bunch of young seedlings where you pulled the hose. I use these higher raised beds as hose guides for when I choose to water. And we already mentioned some of the pests that might get into your raised beds. Well, by having these clearly defined beds, you're also avoiding potential damage from the people walking through your garden. I can't tell you how many times at the Galileo Garden the students would just walk across a newly planted area without even realizing they were stepping on plants. But they wouldn't walk across the raised beds. They'd walk around them. So when you have plants, particularly small plants, these beds provide direction to you and your hose or to people in your garden, but you're not going to have the plant damage that might result otherwise. And this ties in with the next benefit, which is that a raised bed makes your planning and organization of your garden much easier. This is a clearly defined space, so I know exactly how many plants I can put in here, how far apart to place them, and get an idea of what my harvest might be long before I ever put a seed in the ground. I can plan my entire growing season from inside, even when it's cold and snowy outside, because I know how many beds I have. They're already in place. Sure, you can do that in a wide open garden area, but by having each of these modules determined ahead of time, I can get a really good feel for how many seeds I should order and how well the garden will grow. I can get a feel for my flow through the garden and how visitors will also flow through the garden. Before I get to the 10th benefit, I need to point out that there are many, many benefits to growing in a raised bed. So many that I determined I couldn't put them all in one video. So I will have more videos to follow that will list some of these wonderful benefits. The 10th wonderful benefit, there's no soil erosion. If you've got a big flat garden space or even some slightly raised mounds, with rain and the snow, some of that soil is going to wash away. That's not going to happen in these raised beds. The soil in here will stay in here. And especially if you go to the trouble of getting some good soil to grow your plants, you don't want it washing away. You want it staying put, especially in areas with a lot of rain and a lot of snow melt. That can be very important. Soil's in the bed, it's staying in the bed. What other benefits have you seen from raised bed gardening? Please let me know. If it's something new or something I was already planning to talk about, I'll mention you in one of these future videos. And to see those future videos, be sure to subscribe to the GardenerScott channel and click on the bell so you know when the new videos are coming out. If you benefited from this one, well then please give me a thumbs up and share it with others who might be interested. I'm GardenerScott. Enjoy gardening.